Best in class, no doubt at all. Watch me.
Annasley, thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
Appreciate you travelling up to meet us and have a conversation
Thank you.
with Leon and myself. So a good jump off point is, I suppose, your story, which is very diverse, very impressive, shall we say. Unfortunately, we're limited on time because I think we could sit here for a couple of days and talk about it as we have already off camera. So perhaps for our listeners, our viewers, just perhaps high level, bit of your background, and then we'll just dive into the subjects as we go along.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try and keep it in a bit of a nutshell, but come from a military family down in Hereford, and grew up as a sort of sporty girl. Wasn't very good at this sort of education system. Really tried hard, but dyslexia was one of my bigger sort of superpowers, shall we say, but wasn't always my sort of forte in school. So yeah, used sport as my sort of get out clause, and picked up a bike after getting injuries from my running background. Then got selected for the GB Olympic team and represented them for 3 years, but then injury prevailed yet again, and so really sort of lost that purpose and identity, and so then moved out to the French Alps, ran a chalet out there, went to California, lived in a hammock for 6 months, whitewall raft guiding out there. I really enjoyed it. My bank account definitely didn't like it. So then I came back to the UK and really knew that I needed to make some money. So went and did a super yacht deckhand course, and then moved out to Barcelona. Absolutely loved it for 4 years, just travelling all over the world. Big sort of 91 metre super yachts, having a fantastic time, doing a bit of partying, and just loving the lifestyle. But again, 2023 had a huge burnout, and then really sort of had to sit with, what I was trying to chase really. And then it's come 2024, decided I was going to go row an ocean, and a year later I was sat on my little boat in Gran Canaria ready to push off, and 54 days later I parked it in Barbados. So that's
we'll dig into that story as you do.
It's just fascinating. I wanted to interrupt each little part of that and say, tell me more about that. As Martin said, if we could talk about that whole, what you've just said then in that short part for days. There's so many bits to unpick in there.
Yeah.
Well, let's start with the row bit, and maybe we'll work backwards. So there's no pedigree, for the want of a better expression, in rowing. It was like, oh, here's something to do, now I need to go and learn to row.
Yeah, I mean, there is a bit of a backstory. There's always a backstory to my stories, unfortunately. But yeah, when I was out in Antigua in 2021, I was working on a boat at the time, and there was a curfew because obviously COVID was around, and there was a curfew that we were allowed off the boat for an hour, and then we had to come back on board by 6 o'clock. So I would go and do what's called the goat trail around Antigua near Nelson's Dockyard, and I'd take my little journal, I'd sit right on the edge of this cliff with this little tree, and I'd look out into the ocean and watch the sunset, and I'd write in my journal and sort of ask myself about fear, and ask myself about, what this world is all about. And I used to look out and go, gosh, what would it be like to be out there on my own and face the fears, and allow that environment to reveal who I really was. But I was still chasing money at the time, and so I didn't have a strong enough why. But when 2023 came around and I had that sort of huge burnout and also some family stresses as well, that was the time to really sort of sit with it and understand, why I wanted to go out and do it.
Quite deep thinking, maybe looking through my lens when I couldn't tie my shoelace at that age. But that's quite deep thinking. Where does that come from for you?
Yeah, I've always been quite a reflective person. I've always asked the whys, which I don't think my parents liked it, but also especially my captain and my chief officer. Every time I would be in the bridge doing night watch, I'd always be asking why. But I think there's this curiosity especially when you use the outdoors as like your space for freedom. So many questions come into your brain, and I don't know about you, Leon, but when you were training all the time, you were in that space of always looking at the sort of minute, finer detail. yeah, I mean, I don't know whether you can resonate with that, but
I can. I think mine was, I'm really intrigued to hear your story around. Mine was very much around a team element and what was my role within that team, and could I help the team go? I always hear the phrase, make the boat go faster.
Yeah.
There's no boats in what I did, but what could I do in my team to make the team be better? And I'm fascinated around your challenge, the challenge that you've taken on of being, some of them being solo, some of them being on your own, that solitude piece, which I know is a big part of what you do. Before I get there, one of the things you mentioned earlier at the very beginning, which I wanted to touch upon, but I didn't want to interrupt because you were literally in flow, was around, you mentioned dyslexia, and you called it a superpower.
yeah.
Where some people may not see that as a superpower, they may see that as a hurdle to get them going. Do you think that's, when did you realise or identify that as a superpower, and do you think that might lead to your inquisitiveness about asking questions?
Yeah, I think you know, a lot of people sort of say, "Oh, be careful with, you know, saying it's a superpower," and I can understand where they're coming from with that. But for me, I was ignorant to it in a way. I knew that I struggled at school. I knew that I was embarrassed the fact that I couldn't read properly for a long time, and every time I would do exams, I never wanted to ask for help. I really sort of had to hone in, and if I had to read one sentence 10 times, then that was what I had to do, and I just didn't want to ask for that. I didn't want to be seen as this sort of weak person that not only is struggling at school but also is really trying at a sport but isn't quite there, and so yeah, for me it was just like, how every time I struggled with something, how do I get past that? And why is that the case? And I suppose with dyslexia, there's sort of like this dynamic reasoning, and what dynamic reasoning is looking at the bigger picture, and visualization is a massive part. It's a very creative thinking process.
Hence you going off and sitting on a cliff, journaling,
Yeah.
looking out to see no one there,
Yeah.
getting your thoughts down.
Yeah, I always call it my sort of feral intelligence. And it's kind of, you can't learn it in a classroom, you can't read it in a book. You really have to be intuitive, use that imagination, use that creativity. And I think in a way, especially nowadays, you know, I was working as a teacher over the last sort of 6 months or so, and there's this sort of creative mindset has been really stumped, and we don't give that room for adversity and challenge. And you know, it has to be well facilitated. We don't allow room for that. But you know, I had the most incredible parents who, you know, allowed us to be really creative and inquisitive, whether that's in the outdoor space or whatever we wanted to do. We had that freedom, and a real privilege to be able to do that, which I know there's not a lot of kids that do have that opportunity. But yeah, I think the lifestyle that we had, you know, we were out on the mountains, Mum would take us up whether it was raining or, you know, shining, and we just had that space to play and not be judged and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's where it comes from. I
think what our listeners and viewers won't know is that you're a twin.
Yeah.
So how does that play out growing up with a twin sister? Were you similar? Obviously, you both are the same. Do you both enjoy the same things?
Yeah, she was the naughty twin. She was the naughty twin.
Would she agree with that?
I think she would. But you know, I wouldn't have it any other way. Like, I remember the moments she sort of changed, and it was through that adolescent period, and yeah, there was just this sudden switch. We were both very much into sport, but then she just decided to stop everything, and she went her way for a while, and I had this kind of mindset that I needed to be perfect at everything and not, you know, cause any hassle or trouble. And my sister was just going through like the normal adolescent stuff, the sort of curiosity, but in a different way. But for me, it was like, I saw that as being really bad and naughty. And yeah, I wanted to protect her, but I also knew that she needed to flourish and thrive. And, you know, she's the most incredible mother to two very amazing children. And I just admire her in every single way. And I look at her now, we're so close. And yeah, she's just been my other half, somebody that I've constantly tried to inspire, but also she's inspired me. So yeah, very lucky.
I don't know what would be harder, actually, bringing up two youngsters all rowing the Atlantic solo. Two tough things.
Couldn't do either, I don't think. Can I go back to, and when you're working on the boat, and you mentioned job, I think, before that, and not that those jobs don't have purpose, but you touched earlier on purpose, and then we think about rowing the Atlantic, which we'll get into more of that. How, like, were you seeking? Do you think you were seeking purpose? Appreciating the jobs have an element of purpose, but maybe not on the grander scales that we're looking at now, and potentially what you're doing in the future as well. Were you seeking some purpose there, or just was that journaling part of maybe that process, looking back, that you're trying to find that?
Was this on the super yachts?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what I was. I do know what I was looking for. I was searching for something that had that gave me stability, I suppose. And I was probably looking for them in the wrong ways. So, you know, whether that be with people, whether that be financially, I just needed some sort of stability to be able to sort of almost have an excuse to ground me in, whether it be, you know, get married, have children, and do the sort of normal thing that a lot of people do. But I just knew that wasn't me. And so I was just trying to sort of feel it out in those different sort of phases, whether it was, you know, chasing that money or chasing that freedom, which, you know, working in California and you know, the river was my shower and my place to wash my clothes. And, you know, I was sleeping in a hammock for 6 months with rattlesnakes under me, you know, at 4 o'clock in the morning, you know, deers would run past and I'd have skunks, and it was just incredible. And, you know, you'd be cooking with people from Costa Rica and Italy, and yeah, it was just this amazing community of people. And yeah, I found that freedom, but it just wasn't. I knew that it was coming to an end. And even before that, with running my chalet, you know, I was cooking, cleaning. I was doing everything. I was the only person in Maribel to run a 12-man chalet and do all the jobs. And yeah, I just knew I needed to have that pressure, but I also knew that I needed to have that experience with doing a 180 from disciplined lifestyle to the partying, the drugs, all sort of stuff. And I did that intensely whilst I was out there. So, you know, I would finish at 11 o'clock at night. I'd get up at 6 in the morning. I would finish at 11 o'clock at night, you know, with service and making sure that everyone was good for the evening. I'd then go out and party till 5 o'clock. And I always knew I was late when my bread was outside the front door. So I was just like, well, no time for sleeping, straight onto the full cooked and continental breakfast. So yeah, I hit it pretty hard. So the rowing aspect, and obviously one of the, I suppose, key messages around solace, and maybe on the I've got this lovely image now of a hill with the tree where you were sat and the sunshine or the sun setting even potentially. Was that where you start to formulate this thought, this thought around that putting yourself in solitude will build certain aspects of that you want to create within yourself? Yeah, I think a lot of solitude for me solitude has been my life. You know, whether it be training out in the mountains, and also finding solitude in any sort of job that I've done. I've always tried to seek that, because it's a new space, it's a new environment, and I think that solace really sort of heightens that intuition piece, you know, that gut feeling, which I numbed out for a long time, whether it be through that trying to seek validation on social media, and yeah, just not having that space to be able to tap into it. And so when I didn't have the training element and the physical element, my mind wasn't free. And so when I knew that I needed to go out and row the ocean, I knew that that's what was going to expose and reveal the things that I'd been suppressing for such a long time. And yeah, I mean...
So the argument then, the row wasn't about the journey across it was your journey internally? It
was a lot of sort of many different aspects. There was the sort of charity aspect and the why, but there was also a very selfish part that needed to understand, you know, what it's all meant, and maybe, you know, how do I put that into a language, because a lot of the stuff I've done, I've not really had to use words to explain things. It's been my actions. And I think this is where, Leon comes into play in such a big way for me. Post row, I still didn't know how to get my words out and formulate it into a language that people would understand, because firstly it's too deep for people to understand a lot of the time, and they shut off within 2 minutes, and there's so many layers to it, and yeah, I needed to go through that process to go through those layers and to revisit certain situations and really sort of, in a way it sounds quite spiritual, but allow Mother Nature to really sort of expose those experiences and have it on my own, and go through those visualization processes and stuff like that. But when I came back, I still felt like, well, what do I do with it now? Because I've gone through it, and now I really want to put it into words. And rowing an ocean was one thing, but then in a way it was an ocean of words that I needed to formulate, and Leon helped me through that. Understanding the sort of life cycle and going through my life was the first part, and then just talking and having that opportunity to share the story and guiding me through the different elements as to how to piece it together. So
what did you first see then when you came together?
I remember it was a comment that you just said then, which reminded me when we first had that conversation, which I find fascinating, was when you didn't have the structure in your life. You was definitely someone who's an all-in person. When you commit to something, you go for it, and you don't choose easy. Now, I don't know where that comes from, but you don't choose easy. There's no point in choosing it. You just choose hard. But you said something early on around when you didn't have that structure or the training in your mind couldn't be free. Mm-hmm. So you only created that freedom in your mind when you actually filled up your day with a commitment or a purpose or something, and then that frees your mind in the training or the relaxing of the training. I don't really know, but that's interesting. It was an interesting comment you made then. I don't know if you were aware that you said that, or if that helped you find that freedom that you're looking for in your mind.
Yeah, to be honest, it's just one of those where I say things and it's nice to have that reflection, because I suppose
I analyse everything.
Yeah. I mean, it's really hard not to. I think for somebody who might be able to what's the word, resonate with what I'm trying to say, is it's actually really hard to simplify things for me. I have to really sort of pick it apart, and it sometimes can be to my detriment, and I can get lost in a rabbit hole to a point where I become paralysed, and that's where I feel like I don't have that freedom. Whereas when I've got structure, when I've got a goal and a really strong why, I can kind of go, right, I can lock in and really sort of make the most of my days. And I suppose with the burnout in 2023, that's where it kind of all came to a head, and it made me really reevaluate my life, and post row as well. Like, I've really had to put that into my day-to-day sort of routine and my sort of morning journaling, which I do, to sort of go, well, where is the pause? And this is where I talk about now, is this power in the pause, and really creating space for that, and not feeling guilty, and having that fear and the anger that might come with it. Because a lot of the time before the row, I was getting so angry with why things weren't working, and I was kind of like a victim. And I suppose when there's this sort of anger, it sort of tells you that you don't have a plan, and then comes this sort of fear which tells you that you've only got one plan, and that plan's probably not going to work. Whereas if you really tap into that intuition piece and the visualization of everything, and you really put that power into the pause, you can actually tap into plan Z, which you didn't know, but your body and your mind and your emotions, mentally, physically, knew in the first place. Mm-hmm. So we're always seeking out that sort of guidance from others, but actually we need to tap into who we are and what we know.
This reminds me when we had our first couple of one-to-one sessions around, as already discovered, you've lived already like phenomenal achievements in life, and there's so many stories. The Netflix series and most of the things you've said there, and also a lot of those things you've said now are now on my tick list of things that I want to do. But simplifying the complex was one of the challenges that that we had when we talked through the stuff that you've gone through. Sometimes it's quite weird because sometimes you'll just skirt past something which is massive. And it's interesting you say the power of the pause, but you'd like to say, oh, then I did this and I did this and I did this, and actually my brain's still trying to catch up with the stuff that you've done, thinking, wow, you did that. And actually going in, doing a deeper dive on some of those things. I don't know if you were aware of it, but certainly we would be aware of it, listen to it for the first time. Some of those achievements are phenomenal. But then to do that, just say, oh, then I cycled for Team GB and I've got picked in the Olympics team. Oh, and then I did this. That on its own is a huge life achievement, life goal for lots of people. But then to go on and do something else and do something else and do something else is great. And I know, just like as we know each other now, is you've got challenges in the future that are coming around. But when you've done those, you'll pick something else. You'll pick something else. Where do you think that comes from? That constant. Now what's next? Now I've got that. Yeah. Now what's next?
Yeah, I think I really struggle with just sitting and not having a plan, and actually. To do something, and I also needed to rebuild the finances.
that drives people.
Yeah, so I knew that I needed to expose myself into sort of where the education system was at. So I went and did the teaching stuff, which was a nice distraction, and also again I needed to learn through immersive experience first, sort of hand-on experience, really understand it from a teacher's perspective, student's perspective, and the sort of family's perspective. But yeah, having those couple of months where I just had to do nothing, take myself offline, was really hard. But again, it was a great time to reflect on actually doing nothing is okay, and the guilt shouldn't have to override you. And a lot of the time people sort of ask you like, well, what's next, and they're always asking what's next. And I think that's where this purpose and sort of labels of who you are come into play, whether people put it on you or you put it on yourself. Everyone's asking, well, you're a professional cyclist. Well, no, I'm not a professional cyclist anymore. I'm Annasley, and this is what I love. For example, like how many times have you? I don't know how many times you've gone on dates and stuff.
Thousands.
But
Thanks for asking.
God, you're doing better than me, that's for sure. Or you introduce yourself to somebody. The first thing people say is, yeah, this is who I'm Annasley Park and I'm a professional cyclist, or this is what I do, is the sort of second jump in. Actually, it doesn't tell you anything about that person. And I think we forget that sometimes, and so it's that constant chase of like, well, this is my status, and this is not how important I am, but do you know what I mean? Like
your identity is wrapped around. We do a lot of that stuff with military and athletes around. I was always Leon, the rugby player.
Yeah. So
my parents introduced me. Oh, this is Leon. He's our son who plays rugby. I was never Leon the son, really. Leon the dad, the boyfriend, the husband, the brother. I was always Leon the rugby player.
Yeah.
And the danger of that is when you're no longer that person for whatever reason, because you can't play rugby for the rest of your life, and your identity is wrapped around being that person. When that goes away, so does your purpose.
Yes.
So I wake up in the morning thinking, well, that's not who I am now. I've always been Leon, but Leon the rugby player is gone, never to come back. So who am I?
Yeah.
So that's probably where you think about, and that's why I see lots of athletes. I was talking about athletes now. When they retire from that, whatever sport it is, Olympic sports, football, rugby, cricket, boxing, whatever it may be, they're in search of what's next.
Yes.
Because well, I've done this here at this level. I'm used to operating at this level. So either people expect it or they expect it themselves. But what next?
Yeah.
It's never just being.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
We see this in. I'm sure you'll see it with I suppose kids coming through who are very one sports focused as well, where that again that's their identity as a 15-year-old.
Yeah.
And when that doesn't work out, even forget about going through a professional career, they're a bit lost then, because they don't have that identity's gone, isn't it? So it doesn't necessarily need to be at the end of an amazing career. It can be even just from a younger age.
Yeah, and I think that's where you know, as well, where I'm really wanting to focus myself now is that sort of liminal space, that threshold that we all find ourselves in, whether it's micro sort of spaces or, you know, big life changes. I think it's really important to be able to sort of talk about that, whether, you know, you are from military, like a military to civil life, or professional athletes to, well, what do they do next? And, you know, even the younger generation now, from, you know, education to the big wide world. I think it's one of those where there's not enough support in this space, and there's not enough space as well for people to pause. And so, yeah, I'm really passionate about understanding this space, because every time I've gone through, you know, a new cycle, from one career to another, or, you know, big life changes, whether it's family or my social life or anything like that, I've found myself in this space where I've not given myself enough space, and maybe others haven't given me the space to feel. You know, a lot of the time I've not had chance for things to sit in my body. And so one of the things, when I had my burnout in 2023, I delabeled everything, and I decided to go and do a 10-day silent meditation course, which there's a big Dharma school in Herefordshire, and this is sort of focusing on the Vipassana meditation. And you basically don't look at anyone, you don't speak to anyone, and you sit in a lotus pose for between 12 hours, and yeah, you just focused on this small piece from the your nose to the upper lip for the first 5 days, and then you sort of evaluate more of the body. So that was a really intense sort of like cycle of literally, like, you don't know anyone. There's 130 people in this Dharma school, and you are just so focused on you, and it was really quite difficult, and so I knew that wasn't something that I wasn't really happy with what I'd found through that. So yeah, I went out to Marrakesh and did a 300 hours somatic trauma therapy course to understand trauma and what that looks like in the body. And yeah, we focused on the meditation aspect, the movement aspect, and the mindset aspect. And I suppose those three things I've always used but didn't realise. You know, the meditation is through movement for me, whether it's cycling, whether it's being in the outdoors, and it's given me the mindset. So in a way, learning and understanding the sort of somatherapy or somatic method was a really great way to actually go, well, you know, when my body is nervous and I'm shaking, it's a way of releasing that energy. And so yeah, just educating myself in that sort of human performance aspect was really important.
Can I ask a question about the solitude point? I think if somebody, apart from saying one row the Atlantic, apart from the rowing bit, the no upper body strength, the being, dying in the middle of the thing that terrifies me would be being left with my own thoughts for an extended period of time. And obviously your mind can be your greatest weapon or your worst enemy. And how do you tackle that? Because again, if I guess people listening, watching think, I need to spend some time with my mind. Obviously your mind can take you places where you don't want it to.
Yeah.
So being comfortable that when you kind of let go and run the risk of it going the wrong way, how do you embrace that, I guess, to go, it might take me to places I don't want to be, but that's part of the experience, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. I suppose when you've almost reached that place where you know that the person that you are no longer serves you, yet you haven't really reached where you need to be, that's the space that when you've entered that, you're going to take your mind into those spaces. When I was out on the ocean, I allowed my mind to just see what came up, but actually there was not a lot of time to do a huge amount of thinking out there, because it was you had to be focused all the time. There was not a lot of time to switch off.
Was it 54 days?
So it's 54 days, yeah, and
without seeing another person.
Without seeing anyone else, yeah.
Just left to your own devices, your thoughts and the weather and survival and everything else.
Yeah, but do you know what? The most beautiful thing, especially when you come into these really extreme environments, is that there's a state of flow that you suddenly have to, well, you don't have to, but I find, and this is where my comfort zone is in these spaces, whereas maybe a lot of people wouldn't really get to understand it. But, you know, 10 hours into the row, I knew before my capsize, I knew that there was just something off. And that space there was just like, that's where you start to tap into this, what I call this unspeakable world. You don't need a language, you just need to listen, feel, touch, see, taste. And I'd visualised so many times this capsize, but I had never practiced it in real life. So then when I looked to the left side of my shoulder and I just saw this absolutely massive like wall of water, I knew that that was going to be my make or break. So when I got smashed into the water, boat was upside down, there was this sudden silence, and the sudden silence was just like a flashback with like a million images of my life, and it was just so silent and so peaceful. And the only way I ever explain it to anyone is like being back in that sort of my mum's womb, which I obviously don't remember, but it's that safety net of feeling like silent and calm. And then I remember I could open my eyes and I looked at the grey decking on my boat, and I was like wow, I can open my eyes underwater, like whew. And then yeah, the lifeline which is attached to my boat, I pulled on that, and when I got to the surface it was so loud, and I just was like, holy moly, it's on kind of thing. And yeah, I had to let go of everything. Boat came back round, and I got back on board, and alarms were going off, kit was everywhere, didn't lose anything apart from my hats and sun cream, thank God.
This is only 10 hours into this row.
Hours into the row,
Was there a point, be honest, was there a point you thought, no, I can still see land behind, I don't know if you can see land anyway, but
yeah,
I might go back here.
Yeah, I could still see land, and you know, that was the choice then.
10 hours, people are probably still waving to you.
Yeah.
Still waving, good luck.
Do you know what, there was a guy in a little tiny boat, a little wooden boat, and he's just like, oh, Annasley, you've left it too late, you should have gone hours ago, it's terrible out there. And so that was the last contact that I ever had from this guy.
The wise old man.
Yeah, I know. But you know, when that process happened, again, as soon as I opened my eyes into water, it was just natural. There was this sense of calm, like boom, 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 boom. And it was the most terrifying thing, but it was also the most amazing feeling, because, you know, reflecting on it now, I don't know how I did it. And it was just such an amazing process to go through. And it was almost like the ocean knew I needed to go through that to set the tone then for the rest of the row. And you know, I was chasing a world record at the time, and the next 3 weeks was just, you know, go, go, go. And in a way, I'd forgotten that reminder at the start, and my team were so incredible. Like, I could not have had a more amazing team ever. You know. What does your team look like? So obviously, we know that you rode solo. Yeah.
I'm big on team. We talked about team a lot, and that. The thought of being by myself for that amount of time, I like my own company, but the thought of that is quite scary. So when you talk about team, the emphasis on the team, what role did they play in this?
Yeah, so I had a core team, so that was my coach, I had an amazing safety officer, and I had a tracker, a weather router, I had a med team on standby, that was only via phone. I had a PR team, and yeah, they were all there sort of with whatever I needed. I had them on the sat phone to give them a call at any point. And yeah, there was always contact every day through means of communication, whether it was to have, you know, a weather report or, you know, telling me what's happening in the world, or to just give that reflection, and also for them to give me some home truths. You know, for that 3 weeks, I was so focused on how many miles I'm getting done, I'm so far behind, I'm this, that and the other, and they held me accountable, and they said, Annasley, it doesn't matter about, you know, how many miles you're doing or how many hours you've done, like, you just need to wake up and know that that day is going to be, you know, full effort. Stick to your standards, stick to your routine, stick to what you know, and just keep going. And then my coach, who is one of the best ocean rowing coaches in the world, probably the only, you know, ocean rowing coach in the world, who gave me this an amazing moment where he hit it hard on the phone, and it just knocked me, and I was just like, yeah, wake up, Annasley, you're in a real privileged position to be out here and be experiencing this. And from that moment onwards, I just had to change my mindset and forget about the world record, and just be out there and see what happens. And from that point onwards, it was just like I almost could see everything from, you know, every wave that broke differently, whether it broke backwards or whether it broke forwards, or, you know, there was this bird that followed me every day on sunsets and sunrises, and you know, having that connection with the wildlife out there, and, you know, the way you would watch the wind change when the sun would come up in the morning. Like, it was always it was always really frustrating, especially when you get up in the morning and you've got big waves coming over the boat, and, you know, you're not going in the right direction. But sometimes you just wait for the sun to come up and your wind vane would just change, and slowly, and you watch it and you watch it and you watch it, and then it would just all follow with you, and you could just see the patterns of water at certain times of the day, and there was moments like that. But
it's a spiritual piece in here then, as you're doing that. I assume you mentioned the bird. I assume there's got to be times, or even reflecting after, of like just what's going on, and, you know, what is the world, what, you know. I think you know, there's a big element with, and I didn't know this guy called Michael Holt, who had my boat before I did, who died in the boat that I had. My boat was called True Blue, and he was doing the same course as me. He was going from Spain to Barbados, and he unfortunately passed away in it, and so, you know, got brought back to the UK. I did it up, and you know, it was at the start line, and I knew that as soon as I took that boat on, that I was going to take myself and Michael and finish it. And that bird for me was Michael, and it was just this, it was this sort of connection to somebody that I'd never met, but I felt like I had a duty to carry what he was trying to do in memory all the way to the very end. And I had this little like RNLI sovereign little wooden thing, and I carried it in my boat, and every day I just carry it there, and I took a few photos, and I just hope that Michael was proud of what we did together.
I think you've just only touched upon it. That I know the story in a little bit more detail than some of our listeners and viewers are about the importance of the bird that would turn up every day, the only piece of, you know, of anything, of wildlife or anyone that you'd seen for that time, and the days it didn't turn up. Yes. And how those things can sort of trigger things in your mind again. How did you cope with that?
Yeah, do you know, it's you brought a really good thing up actually. Like, there was only a few days where the bird didn't turn up, and when it didn't, I was just like.
So where would it go? Like, again, excuse my naivety. You're in the middle of nowhere.
I know.
Where is it?
Yeah, no idea. And I'd just be like, where are you? And it would always soar through these sort of peaks and troughs, and you know. Oh, it was just magical to watch, especially on the sort of sunsets where the water in the evenings was like this silky grey, and when you got these really lovely sloping waves that didn't break, they were just huge swells, and it would just soar through, and I'd have this particular bit of music on, and, you know, we'd just sort of smash it out together, and then on the days where, you know, he eventually came back, it would be on days where I'd call it like unlubricated mashed potato. It was really, really annoying, like rowing on this stuff, because not only are you going really slow, but you just can't hit a rhythm. And so, yeah, it would sort of fly by, and I've got so many pictures and films of this bird, but it would fly by and it would come right close to the boat, and it would just sort of like run its little legs on the water and make it look really easy. So I just, I'd have this conversation with like, why are you not helping me? And yeah, it was just, we had a great laugh together, and this bird knew more about me than a lot of other people did. But it felt very spiritual, and also very connecting. On the days where it was fast, you'd look for a certain surface type, and this surface type was like, again, I can only explain it this way because there were so many surface types that you were looking for, but there was one particular bit which it was like a perfectly hoovered carpet with and it was like Granny's wrinkly elbow as well, so it had like a little ripple, but perfectly hoovered carpet, and then a bit of shaken back on top. Like if you saw that, you were going to go fast. And on the days where I saw it, and it was like also really big conditions, and I was going 1.5 knots instead of 4 knots, I got really frustrated. And there was a particular part around about 1,000 miles to go, and I knew that I had a weather window to get out and scrub the hull, because you get quite a lot of barnacle growth on the bottom, and I knew that there was going to be a tropical storm hitting me, and I needed to get far enough down south before I knew I was going to have to go onto anchor, because I wasn't able to hold the line. So yeah, I was doing 1.5 knots, and I was like, I've got to get out and do the hull. But it was just massive, and because my boat has only got one cabin, you can't do what's called pin to the wind. So typically if you've got 2 cabins, you can get equal pressure on both sides and pin it to the wind. And so that's when you scrub your hull, you don't have to worry about the boat landing on your head. But for me, I couldn't do that, so I had to put everything on neutral and lock everything off and run with the wind, which there was a high chance that the boat would hit me on the head. And so I think that was probably one of my scariest feelings, is that if anything was to happen to me, I'd be left in the water alone. So how
long would that take? How long would that take for somebody, if anything happened? Thankfully nothing did happen. If something the worst would happen, how long would it take for the nearest person to get to you, or to realise if you can't ring it in?
Yeah, again, so this is why I had the most incredible team, because they were just like, as soon as you go in the water, you let us know, and as soon as you're out, you've got half an hour to do it. If we don't hear off you in half an hour, I'll send you a message. If we're not getting any response, then we're going to go straight to calling an evacuation or like assistance. I was pretty hot on the fact that I had half an hour, and then boom, straight back onto the team, so that they didn't call anyone out and
call it
stop
all
the race.
Yeah, the few miles to go.
Yeah, but you've got vessels, and it's amazing really if you look on marine traffic, actually how many vessels you do have around you. I had at least 5 boats try and sort of target me. Only 2 of them were quite close misses.
Target in the sense of to check who the hell this is in the middle of nowhere.
Well, to be honest, having a 6-metre ocean rowing boat, you don't really expect it, and you've got these massive 400-metre tankers just zipping through, and they're going at quite a decent speed, and especially at night time. Normally my AIS, which is like a system that alarms when you've got a vessel close by, so you've got a 2-mile radius, and anything within that, or that's going to approach you within that vicinity, the alarm goes off.
And would they see you based, obviously they're in big tankers, would they see something as small as you or not?
Not really.
No, okay.
I mean, if they were close enough to you, then but a lot of the time they don't actually monitor their radars.
Okay.
They're just kind of like, we're not going to see anything, it's the middle of the Atlantic kind of thing. So because of my capsize, I'd also had a problem with my antenna. So I could transmit, but I couldn't really receive any sort of radio activity. So when my AIS went off, I would,
panic.
Yeah, well, I'd panic, and then I'd be like, right, get the flares ready. But yeah, I'd call them up and talk to them on the radio and say, look, have you seen me? If not, please, give me a wide berth. And it took about 11 seconds to go from the bottom of the wave or from the bottom of the trough to the top. And so you'd have a minute to to talk to them, because I was on a handheld radio at this point, which is line of sight. And it'd be quite hard for them to sort of make those communications. But yeah, one of them was like half a mile away from me, which isn't a huge, like, that's quite close, really. But yeah.
Into the ripple from the...
Yeah.
Ripple, I think we're more than the... So we spent quite a bit of time on, like, that I can't relate to that. When you're telling that story there, I think it's phenomenal, but it's also scary. Like, that is... I wouldn't thrive in that environment. But we spent some time trying to... How do you make that relatable when you're going out and talking to organisations and doing your keynotes and doing your talks about that? How would you make that relatable to the person like me who sat in the audience who has a bit of a fear of the big wide, ocean?
Yeah.
What do you zone in on to make that relatable?
Yeah, I think for me, to be able to make any of my sort of stories relatable, I always have to go in with that vulnerability to start off with, and share the fact that, I'm not a superhuman, I'm not any different to anyone else. But my comfort zone is maybe different to, say, somebody else's comfort zone. But yeah, I always sort of try and bring in that sort of solitude piece in first. That's the most important to enter any sort of given situation, is to sort of create that space, create that sort of time to feel into it, feel those emotions, acknowledge those emotions, and then understand how big it is, that sort of magnitude piece of it all. How do we sort of face it and then descale it, and then how do we use this sort of sense of awe to override fear? And I sort of look at that attitude piece and really hone onto that sort of sense of awe piece. And one of the stories that I always sort of share with my audiences is, in the mornings would always be the hardest part, and that would be where the fear really sort of came in, especially because there was like huge sleep deprivation. You'd wake up and you could hear all these sort of like what sounds like bullets and bombs going off around you, because you've got a very, very thin piece of fiberglass separating you and 5 kilometres of water below you. And it sounds worse than what it is, but you've got to get your wet clothes on, you've got a sore bum, and you've got a good day of rowing again. And that fear piece would come in, but you'd set yourself up, and I would always put like 3 baby wipes down my sleeve, and I knew that as soon as I opened the door, clipped on, shut the door, I'd get the bucket out and I would sit on the bucket to do a bucket and chuck it situation.
Bucket and chuck it.
A bucket and chuck it. But that would be my grounding, my foundation to go from fear to a sense of awe. And it would be, I'd look at the sort of starlit sky and the moonlit horizon a lot of the time, and I would just ask myself 2 questions. And the first one would be this sort of conceptual vastness. What am I going to learn out here? And this perception, perceived vastness, this wonder, this exploration. And then, bringing those 2 pieces together, this sort of need for accommodation of, what am I going to learn, and this vastness, how am I going to bring that back into my real life? Because out there is no structure, there is no patterns that you once knew that are going to serve you in that moment, and there is no society, there's no human connection to sort of help you. The only connection you have is yourself, those internal systems. So when you reintegrate yourself back into society and patterns and structure, you've got to be able to have those foundations, those grounding moments. And so, yeah, for me, it was a case of use that every day and bring that into life when you come back.
It's quite interesting listening to the thought process of what am I going to learn out of this, because I think when you go through doing things outside your comfort zone, it's often done in a reflective mode, so you do it and then later on you look back, but you seem to be doing it real time.
Yeah, I think with a lot of athletes that I've spoken to, that's kind of one of the things that sort of separates them from other people. And Leon, I'd love to talk to you about that actually.
Yeah,
I'm quite interested to see how...
I did quite a bit of research on that, about reflecting on action versus reflecting in action. So when you reflect on action, when something's happened, you can analyse your performance and, what did we do wrong, what did we do right? When it happens again, what can we do differently? Versus having the ability to reflect in action, where you're actually in the moment and you're realising things are going wrong, rather than waiting for the analysis. What am I going to do here and now? And it's that, we mentioned the pause quite a lot, it's about having that ability to go, stop. What's happening here? This is not going according to plan. What do I need to do now to prevent it from being an error? Or this is going great. How do we ramp it up and continue going, rather than waiting for the analysis afterwards? And I think that it's interesting how you say that in the athletic space. I didn't know that at the time when I was competing. Only afterwards, when I've sort of looked into research around the ability to reflect in action, is a sort of super strength really. And if you know you can do that, then that's great. It sounds like you knew that you were able to do that at the time, versus, we'll analyse it when we get back in 54 days' time. Yeah. Because sometimes you don't have that time. Like you make the wrong decision then, you don't get to 54 days. Yeah. Especially what you're doing, like that's life and death type thing. Whereas in I suppose sport, it's not really life and death in some sports, in most sports, thankfully. But there's that's certainly a skill set.
Is that trainable?
I think it is. I think it's repetitive. It's exposure therapy. It's putting yourself in those positions where you can see it, you can see what's coming, and again, it's through routine. But I suppose what Anna's is talking about, I don't know, you don't row the Atlantic as a practice to make sure you get it right when you do it for the real time. So you're doing it in real time, which is a lot harder. Yeah. Like how do you prepare for that? I don't know. Like I can prepare for a rugby match because the pitch is the same size. We know the opposition is going to have the same number of people. There's always going to be a referee. So you're controlling the controllables is a lot of them. You understand them. What can't you control? The weather. What the referee decision he makes, what the opposition makes. But you can control large parts of that. I suppose that's where, in elite sport or elite anything, having that ability to control. It's interesting to hear how much can you actually control, and you're actually giving your control away. Yeah. You're there. You can control the boat that you can row. You can't control the speed you're rowing at because the wind and the current would dictate that. Yeah. So it's that you sort of open yourself up to a lot of the elements, I think. Yeah,
I think volatile environments can really sort of heighten that, and that's where that sort of adapt and overcome mindset really comes into play. And whether it be rugby or rowing an ocean, everyone's rowing an ocean of some kind, but it's how you are proactive rather than reactive in any of those situations. And that's again that proactive mindset of what can I foresee, what can I understand in those situations that I've been in before, and how can I use that intuition piece, how can I use that visualization piece, how can I use that creative mindset piece, and not try and control my external. It's sort of like that locus of control, that internal processing, and those external support systems that you build around yourself are really, really important to be able to really look at what you're trying to achieve. So yeah.
I've just got one final question, just on the comfort zone area, because you mentioned there, like maybe rowing the Atlantic's in my comfort zone. I'm like, is it in anyone's? But do you think, or you believe that you've got to, if it's, say this is your comfort zone, appreciating it's visual, then it's finding out what's this piece that isn't, and going and doing that, so you're widening your call it your resilience or your comfort zone. Do you think that's important, or is that something I suppose you do actively think about? Is that what we're talking about here?
Yeah, I'm.
Because it's easier not to row the Atlantic than to row it.
Yeah. But I think for me, I'd always have that regret. I would always have that regret, and I'd always have that wonder. I wonder if, or what if? And I don't want to live with any what ifs. I want to go. I would rather, and this is probably where I do take it to the extreme, is I'd rather die knowing I tried, rather than going what if on my deathbed. So it's not about trying to do something that not many people want to do. It's about exposing myself to this sort of modern philosophy and stoicism, and re-exploring that, because I don't think we have enough of that mentality, especially in the younger generation too. And I'm still very much a student in this area of work, and I think those spaces and being able to bring that back are really important, to be able to bring those lessons into the community, whether it be in the military space or whether it be in the education space or the corporate space. You know, I feel like because there's so many layers, and you know, I'm always wanting to learn off other people as well as the sort of environments that I put myself in. I'm sort of chasing that in a way now more than anything.
Where are the environments? Obviously, that's a phenomenal story. Stories plural. Where are you? People sort of booking you to go and share that story. Where are you having the most impact? Is it in the schools, giving confidence to not just young girls to see what is possible, but to just young people in general? Is it in the corporate space around having the ability to pause, step outside your comfort zone, you know, and managing those self-limiting beliefs, being in control of that? Is it in the sporting space around this is what does good look like, what does normal look like? Can we push past that? Where have you seen yourself working, and where's the space that you'd like to see yourself develop into?
Yeah, I really struggle to sort of put myself in one area.
Yeah. Maybe there's not. Maybe I think everyone can learn. There's something you said that's so vast. People can learn from all over. But I just wondered if there was a specific area that's calling out to you and grabbing you now, as you spend a lot of your time.
Yeah, I think my dream is to leave a legacy in into the next generation. But I would love to be the bridge between the education space and the corporate space, or the sort of like, you know, whether it's CEOs and leaders or, you know, the managerial role. I don't feel we have enough people who have got that immersive experience coming into the education space and having that sort of company social responsibility in a way to sort of lead the next generation. You know, we're the sort of government funding is hugely lacking in the education sector. I think the education sector needs to change in the way it sort of facilitates adversity and challenge, because I don't think there is any anymore. And I would really like to sort of see a new responsibility in companies and people bringing in their experiences to either do workshops or you know, lessons and come into classrooms, and not just leave it to you know, teachers who do such a fantastic job and are trying their best in every sort of way. But you know, I think having that immersive experience is really key.
Yes.
So inspirational. So if people wanted to see you, hear from you, where do they do that? How do they get in touch with you to find out the stuff that you're doing?
Yeah, so I got my website, www.annasleypark.com, and you can also find my Ocean Survival, which is OAR at the end. You can have a look at my website there. I'm also on LinkedIn at Annasley Park, and also on Instagram, AnnasleyPark_1.
Amazing. We'll put some links in the footers. I'm sure you've got adventures to come up that I'm sure we'll hopefully chat about in the future as well. Yeah. Certainly my side, having met you today for the first time, yeah, it's very inspiring. We normally ask for kind of a book recommendation, but the reality is everyone's listening to this podcast. They don't need to go anywhere, do they? It's here. Yeah, there's a book.
When's your book coming, baby?
Oh God, I need a few more years,
the books, plural. Yeah.
So thank you for sharing what is in the reality a small snippet of an amazing 29 years. So thank you and appreciate your time.
No, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time too.
Best in class, no doubt at all. Watch me ride.